Natasha knew the constellations and galaxies. Worlds and worlds, Natasha said. It goes on and on and on. She dipped her head back and pointed up, and Eva repeated, "Mommy," she said. "Mommy, on, on, on." We put the babies to sleep in a nest of blankets inside the easy chair sofa pen so they wouldn't wander or roll onto the floor. We went back into the back bedroom where the blankets smelled like a different season. In the morning, Natasha was gone, and all the windows were warped in their frames. There was fuzz growing on the wall, a haze of mildew across the old white. Something was hollowed out in me. I could feel it blooming up the way that hunger used to surface in Eva's face when she was tiny, and we would watch her and see the milk craving push her, whimpering, up from sleep. There was nobody in the living room, an empty cocoon of blankets beside the couch. In the kitchen, Eva sat on the linoleum floor, below the sink, crushing potato chips in her fist. "Mommy," she said, holding up her hands. And then she opened her mouth again, and I could see all her questions, distinct and fiery bright, all the questions she had for me and would have for me forever, on and on into the future like glowing orbs linked one into the other, and now I couldn't plug up her questions with my tip. Out through the big sink window, I saw a body walking, Natasha among the cow pies. She had Johnny over one shoulder and her hand stretched out in front of her. Eva and I called to her from the porch, and she waved her hand in the air and said something I couldn't understand. I put Eva on my hip and walked out. The breeze against my skin, Eva's sticky fingers clutching. I felt it all over my body, raking me. Natasha stood way out on a rise, pressing her cell phone to the sky. "Can't get a fucking signal," she said. The wind lifted her red hair. My cell phone was dead. Natasha plugged ours both into chargers in her car and turned the engine on to juice them. "God, I hope he doesn't take all day," she said. "I don't want to get sick." Her nose was running. "Let's clean house," she said. The cupboards were tall and full of mouse shit. "Here we go. Let's do this." Natasha took a broom to them. I didn't know then the clock she was up against. I just knew mine. I needed 2 Oxy 30s every day or I'd feel like shit. Chills, runny nose, aches. If I didn't get at least 1 perk or Oxy or Roxy for more than a day, I'd go from constipated to shitting myself. I'd never shot black tar before, though, and I didn't know that Natasha was dragging around that kitchen with a thinning riddle of time between her and that trembling, rioting, bodily doom. Out behind the house, there was a shed with a few moldering hay bales. I didn't see any animals around. The floor was soft with a fine silt, a silky, dark dirt tread on so many times it had turned to talcum. Eva picked up handfuls and let it run through her fists like sand. Everything smelled of work. Machine oil stink and the tang of metal. One whole wall was hung with implements that stirred up names in me. A mallet, a maul, a poleaxe, a foot adze, a draw knife, a glut, and a shaving horse. They were grandpa tools, and I wondered again whose place this was. Could have been Natasha's grandparents, though all the Crookshanks I'd ever heard of came from the western end of the county. Could have been her dealer told her it was empty up here. The back wall of the shed was filled with bleached skulls in a perfect gradation from coon at the top down through fox and deer and cow. "Who?" Eva pointed up at them, and then Natasha's scream pierced us both. She was wearing a pair of pink high heels and kicking at the car tire. "It's dead," she said, and kept kicking the tire. "Engine won't turn over." She kicked again, and her heel stuck in the mud on the tire. Her pale foot lifted just as she bent to reach for the shoe, her mouth opened, and a long string of liquid ran all out and down her leg. "Fuck, give me a minute," she said. I turned away, bounced Eva, and wondered where Johnny was. Fucking goddamn motherfucking Jesus Christ, I'm gonna be sick. She walked past me toward the porch, grabbed onto the lathed wood banister, and vomited again into the front flower bed, all over the scraggly cabbage roses and daylilies. "Did you talk to him?" I asked. "He's down in Render," she said. "Can't come up here yet." I found Johnny strapped into the back seat of the car, and I brought him back in the house. We all sat on the kitchen floor together and watched time drip down the walls. My phone was charged, but it wouldn't load anything. I cut the top off an empty Gatorade for Natasha to throw up in. Her tits were leaking, and she squeezed the milk into another bottle. Deetra had quit texting Natasha back. I told her I'd walk out to the road and hitch a ride and go find him, make him come quick. I didn't really know Ditro that well, but I'd seen him around. He'd be at Baloo's, or else somebody would be there and know how to find him. I kind of thought I should take Eva with me. I looked at her there in the nest of pillows, her pink lips fluttering, just the tiniest bit, and her eyeballs chasing dreams. But Natasha had milk for her when she woke up, and I had nothing. It took me 2 rides to get to Baloo's, because the first to pick me up was Ms. Walkup, who'd worked with Mom in the cafeteria 3 years back. She wasn't going to take me to Baloo's. It was all I could do to stop her from driving me to Mom's house. So I got out at the Dollar General across the street from the Family Dollar. I bought jars of baby food in shining jewel tones, oranges and yellows and greens, and I felt better already. After Ms. Walkup left, I just waited to find a man alone in a truck. I told the man to drive me to Baloo's. I tied my baby food jars up inside their plastic sack, and I walked along the path to the back of the bar. The man with the truck followed me. Junie was working, and she flashed me a smile, and I looked at my ride, and she looked my ride up and down. He wasn't ugly, but one of his eyes was a little lazy. "Bud Light?" Junie said to me. I shook my head. My ride was buying, so I was going straight for Jack. The bar stools were about half full. Danny and Scotty and Justin and Jason Hicks and Old Man Mitchum down at the end. "You seen Ditro?" I asked Junie. "Not since yesterday," she said. My ride and I took 2 of the stools, and I turned to Justin and cheersed. He was nursing a bud and looking gone. "You seen Ditro?" I asked. He shook his head, but Jason Hicks leaned up and said, "He's supposed to meet me here." So I put my baby food jars on the counter where I wouldn't forget them, and I got Junie to give me another shot of Jack and a beer, and I settled in to wait. It turned out that my ride was a wick line. He knew my dad before Daddy had started long-haul trucking, back when he was working at Bethlehem Quarry. This wick line was younger than Daddy, by maybe 10 years, but he'd worked out there too, and he was shocked to make the connection. It was like time had gone and doubled over on him. He kept saying, "chubby-cheeked, curly-headed little thing," talking about baby me. Luckily, this connection didn't stop him from sharing his pills. We stepped out onto the deck to smoke, and he palmed and swallowed, and I asked for some. It was right around when Wickline's pills kicked in, uppers of some kind, that I quit paying attention to my phone. Up until then, I'd been checking it, texting Natasha and Ditro, even though I didn't hear peep back from either of them. Time slid away down off the deck after a while, washed away in the current. Wickline kept buying me shots of Jack, and when I got wobbly, he brought me a plate of golden French fries. I fed half of them to the fishes down below, and this tickled Wickline, who kept saying chubby-cheeked, curly-headed little thing. The fishes rose to the surface, spotted and glistening, an ancient, breathtaking breed. I was thinking about Daddy, wondering where he was that day. Omaha, maybe. Wickline knew a song about long-haul trucking. "I've been from Tucson to Tucumcari," he sang. It wasn't until Jason Hicks started fussing about where in the fuck was Ditro that I remembered. The sun was low. Neither Natasha or Ditro had answered my texts. Wickline agreed to drive me back up Flat Mountain. He carried my baby food to his truck and nestled it in the crook of his arm. I kept yelling at him, "Careful, don't break it." I could feel my panic edging up. He took the 3rd steep curve too quick, and the back end of his pickup shimmied out, and then the wheels weren't touching. We turned over slower. And then a tulip poplar stopped us, wedged the bed there between the bank and the tree. Neither me or Wickline was hurt much. He got a little glass in his hand, and my hip was bruised. He hauled me out, and I was stunned mostly. When I quit seeing black spots in my eyes, I made him crawl back down there for my baby food. My phone didn't have enough of a signal to make a call, so he started walking back towards town, and I started walking the other way, towards Natasha and Eva and Johnny. I kept thinking that Ditro would pass me after leaving Natasha's, and I'd make him turn around, drive me back, but I never did see him. By the time I made it to the house, the cicadas had almost all the way quit. I'd sweated out all the alcohol and pills, and I couldn't wait for Natasha to fix me up again. The house made a long shadow all the way across the lane, and the edges of the shadow were fraying. Natasha's car was the only one there, but the yard was torn up with another set of tire tracks. "Tasha," I called. My feet were hurting from walking so much in flip-flops. She was in the sofa pen in a nest of blankets. Johnny sucking on one tit, the other one glistening bare. The first thing I noticed was Eva wasn't there. I called her name. "Hey, Tasha, where's Eva?" I lurched and stumbled over the arm of an easy chair. "Hey, Tasha, wake up." She wasn't sleeping. It was something about the angle of her neck and how her head lay. And then I saw the needle and spoon, the little bag of black tar on the blanket beside her. I shook her furiously. And Johnny lost his grip on her nipple and started to howl. I was disgusted with him. "She's dead," I told him. "Dead. Nothing but skin around veins, around muscles, around bones." He screamed louder. I took the needle and the bag of tar and I put them on the kitchen counter. The house had tilted all shadowy blue. I ran through the rooms calling Eva's name. If I ran fast enough, I felt sure I could reach out and reclaim all the hours I'd been away. I burst out the back door and the ground was a soft green carpet. All I thought about was Eva and Cam. I begged Cam to help me. I begged her to come. Natasha I could grieve later. Johnny would be okay. But Eva. I pictured Cam's face and Eva's. Cam's little clone, blonde curls, pink lips, always parted. I fell in the grass and the dew licked my face. I crawled, and when I could crawl no more, I looked up, and she was counting skulls, right there around the back of the shed, chubby-cheeked, curly-headed little thing, her hand raised, finger pointing. 1, 2, 3. The last ray of sunlight hit the top row and lit the tiny, papery frames.
Damn. How y'all holding up? You good? I really was asking that for myself, but that was fabulous. All right, so Nima Avashia hails from the great state of West by God, Virginia. Like Slaw Dogs and the Mothman. She's a writer, mother, educator. Avashia was born and raised in southern West Virginia to parents who immigrated to the United States. She's been a middle school teacher in the Boston Public Schools since 2003. She's a widely celebrated author of Another Appalachia, Coming Up Queer, and Indian in a Mountain Place. And one of the things I love about the writing community at Hyman is the network and support that we get and give to each other. And on my writing journey, Nima gave me a really important piece of advice that felt spot on today, but it's that you don't have to listen to everything your editor says. So I've always appreciated that, and she's always been a champion of my bookstore and indie bookstores across the country. So a little bit about this memoir, Another Appalachia. It's a Lambda Literary Award finalist, a Weatherford Award finalist. It was named Best LGBTQ+ Memoir of 2022 by Bookright, and a New York Public Library Best of 2022. Another Appalachia redefines what outsiders believe to be the Appalachian story by encouraging readers to envision more complex versions of both Appalachia and the nation as a whole. Her essays have appeared in Bitter Southerner, Catapult, the Kenyon Review Online, and elsewhere. And above all else, one of her greatest achievements is that she's the best granny-style free throw shooter, second only to Wilt Chamberlain. Please help me welcome Nima Avashia.
I don't know about second best. There's probably a couple other people on that list. Thanks, Mandy, for that beautiful introduction. Thank you all for having me here. It's so lovely to be back with you. I think in a lot of ways, and if you've read the book, you know this, the book doesn't exist without this place. Coming to Hyman was a really important step for me in my journey towards writing this story, because for so long I'd been like, I don't know, am I Appalachian? I'm not really sure, right? And where I lived, it wasn't very clear to me whether I was or wasn't. And it was in this community that I was like, no, it's actually possible, right? And I think these name tags, which I left mine upstairs, but the name tags, all the flair, like, actually I think speaks to that, because this is a space where, like, being Appalachian doesn't mean being just one thing. There's room for all of us in that definition, and there are ways to make that definition flex in ways that That wasn't a lesson I learned when I was growing up, but it's a lesson I feel like I've learned here, and I'm really grateful for it. I didn't want to read you anything from the book because I want to read new things when I'm in front of people, but I also published a book and had a baby last year, and if you want to kill your writing, do that. So I'm going to read you new words, but they're rough words. But I also wanted to read them because in class today, we talked about how when you're writing nonfiction, sometimes imagination and speculation can really be your friends. Sometimes there are gaps in the story, and there are pieces that you don't have, but there are still ways to write about them, whether they happened or not. You just have to be honest about what you're doing. And this is a piece that has some of that in it, so I thought it was helpful. For folks who are in my class, it'll give you a chance to see me trying to do that here. It needs work still, but it's me working on that. This essay is part of a new collection I'm working on that I thought was called the Book of Broken Rules. I'm not so sure I'm breaking all the rules. I'm maybe trying to unlearn the rules. And this essay is about unlearning the rule that blood is what makes family. Troy has been ghosting me all week, sending texts and then not following up on them. He texted me a meme on Wednesday, a picture of Anderson Cooper with the caption, "Analysis. There's one epidemic we may never find a vaccine for, fear of black men in public spaces." I write back, "I love you, and I wish I could carry some of this weight with you." It is the week of George Floyd's execution by police officers in Minnesota. 2 months after Breonna Taylor was shot and killed in her own living room. 3 months after Ahmaud Arbery was killed by white vigilantes while out on a morning run. 6 years since the deaths of Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, and Eric Garner forced America to begin waking up from its white supremacy-induced stupor. He doesn't respond. I've known Troy since he was 11 and a 6th grader in the very first group of students I ever taught at the John W. McCormick Middle School in Dorchester, the most populous and diverse neighborhood in the city of Boston. He was opinionated and talkative then, and he remains opinionated and talkative now. Over the course of our 17-year relationship, in which we've evolved from teacher and student to mentor and mentee to just plain family, he always checks in with me and lets me talk him down when he's on the verge of something reckless. Until this week. 2 days later, he sends me another meme, this one about a blackout day on July 7th, where black folks refuse to spend money in order to show their economic impact as a way to demand justice. I write back, "Friday, needed, what's your self-care plan?" Again, he doesn't respond. While we've always talked about race, and Troy has often felt comfortable sharing his struggles as a black man in this country with me, as he's gotten older, I've sometimes felt painfully aware that I'm a middle-aged Indian woman, not a 20-something black man. And that while I can listen and empathize and support, there's still a distance between my lived experience and his that makes it hard to feel like I'm always the most effective support for him. I've connected him with colleagues, with black men who work in education and academia and can help him navigate that space, but Troy maintains that the only person he feels like he can really talk to is me. And sometimes I'm not sure I'm enough, or that my love for him is enough. Saturday, I send him an eyes emoji, the one he always sends me when I, very often, miss his texts. Because in our adult relationship, I'm usually the scattered one, the one who misses calls and texts, the one who reschedules dinners and brunches because I'm terrible with calendars and tend to overcommit. Troy, on the other hand, is consistent. He calls me to check in once every 2 weeks. He texts during hard moments to see how I am. He gives me advice when I'm struggling at work with a student or a colleague. And he's persistent with his follow-up. Gentle, but persistent. The way, I suppose, I always was for him when he was growing up. Still, Saturday comes and goes with no message from Troy. Sunday during the day, same thing, no response. By this point, my unease is palpable. On our morning walk at Jamaica Pond, I tell my partner Laura, this isn't like Troy. Something has to be off. He never goes this long without texting back. Sunday night, after scrolling through Universal Hub, a local news source, looking at posts about the protests that were first peaceful and then provoked out of peace by aggressive policing, I check my phone and see 2 missed calls and 1 missed FaceTime, all in a row with only seconds in between each call. Troy. I check my voicemail and there are 2 messages from him, both no more than 5 seconds long, both incoherent. I hear Troy say my name, say something that sounds like I swung at them, say he needs me to call him. Something's wrong with Troy, I tell Laura. I know right then that he's gone to the protest, that perhaps his evasiveness in the days prior was him making sure I didn't talk him out of it. Troy is a 6'3" black man living in America. When he sees Ahmaud Arbery, he sees himself. When I see George Floyd, I see him. Those facts make him want to fight. They make me want to throw my body across him like a human shield. I call back. Neems, I need you to come get me. I need you to come get me. Come get me. Troy's voice is garbled, full of liquid, and I imagine loose teeth. His usually succinct speech replaced by rambling repetition. Where are you? I'm coming. Where are you? I run to put my shoes on. Laura follows, having the presence of mind to grab the masks she knows we'll need if we have to go into the hospital. COVID-19 makes Boston hospitals fortresses, with strict rules around masking and visitors that leave patients dying alone, saying their goodbyes via FaceTime. We're not sure what healthcare would look like in the midst of both pandemic and protests. I'm on Tremont Street in Chinatown. A few blocks away, Universal Hub reports describe the onset of violence, burning cars, broken store windows. Neems, I was pulling down a sign and my arm hit a girl, and a man with a girl swung at me. And you know what happens if you swing at me? I'm gonna swing back. And then they jumped me. You gotta come get me. You gotta come get me. I'm gonna keep walking, but you need to drive down Tremont Street and get me. Troy doesn't ask for help easily. He's been independent and stubborn since middle school, and probably well before that, given that he came to my classroom in September of 2004 after leaving METCO, a desegregation program that sends city kids to suburban schools, but only holds on to them if they agree to assimilate to affluent white norms. Not Troy, not by a long shot. It's taken work to build a relationship where he trusts me enough to ask for help. It's taken repeated, persistent efforts and offers on my part for us to get to a point where he can ask for a loan when he's needed one, like during the gap between college graduation in May and beginning a job in August. He carries help like one would carry a burden, pays off debts as fast as is humanly possible, Venmoing me bi-monthly installments with a brown fist emoji, strives for a level of financial and emotional independence that no middle or upper middle class person has ever had to possess. For him to call like this, seeking help late at night, must exact its own kind of pain. From behind me on the stairs, Laura calls out, Nima, why don't you ask him to go to the hospital and we'll meet him there? Troy, you're right by Tufts Medical. Do you want to go to the ER? We can meet you there. This time when he speaks, he makes sure that his message is clear. I'm not going anywhere without you, Nima. Come and get me. The drive down Tremont Street from my house is uncomplicated. That it wasn't concussion driving his erratic speech. It was adrenaline running through his veins at full speed. All black, of course. You'll find me, though. I'm walking in the street. What do you mean you're walking in the street? You're going to get hit. Neems, I love you, but you have to let me stop talking. It hurts too much, he slurs. I'm by Mela Indian Restaurant and Metropolis Cafe right now. I'll keep walking towards you. We drive in silence then. A few blocks later, a tall man dressed in black with a red backpack slung across his chest comes into view. Laura asks, Troy, do you have something red on you? He confirms, I see you. Troy approaches the car, and even in the darkness, I see that his right eye is completely swollen shut. A mix of blood and saliva pours from his mouth continuously. He stumbles into the back seat, mumbling repeatedly, you should have seen the other guy. Laura directs me to the emergency room at Boston Medical Center. We pull up to the front entrance and immediately see a group of uniformed men out front. This is the first moment when I fully understand why Troy wouldn't just meet me at the ER. I am the human shield. We approach the entrance, me holding Troy's wrist, him still drooling blood. The uniformed men swarm us immediately. What happened? What's going on here? They're looking at him but talking to me, as if I'm the victim, though he's the one covered in blood. Back off, I tell them. He was injured in the protest and needs to get inside. Still holding Troy by the wrist, I walk him into the ER, past the empty check-in desk, and back into the triage area. The minute a nurse sees us, she puts Troy in a wheelchair. A young white police officer from the group outside, probably no older than 22, approaches it again. I'm not talking to you, Troy says, waving him off. 3 times tonight, I've been struck by his presence of mind. First to call for help when so badly injured, then to walk 1.5 miles out of the heart of the protest so I could get to him without trouble, and now to refuse to engage. Give me your phone, Neems. I don't want him to hear me say my mom's number. He enters his mom's number into my phone, and then the nurse wheels him past me through the double doors. Can I go with him? I ask. She shakes her head, pushes him through. I linger in the waiting room, not sure what to do next. The same uniformed officer approaches me, now for a 3rd time. I know he's not going to tell me anything, but what can you tell me? I wasn't there, I say. He called me for help, and I came. All I know is that he got hurt during the protest. He can't talk because his jaw is broken. He asked me for my driver's license, takes down my name and address. Later, Laura tells me he also copied down the license plate number of our car. Behind him, images of a police car in flames flash on the 10 o'clock news. It's crazy out there, he says. A police officer got pulled out of his car and had his head smashed in with a brick. And then they set his car on fire. The whole exchange feels so awkward. Is he trying to help Troy? Does he suspect Troy? Does he suspect me? Does he think I'm going to express empathy or allegiance to him? Or is he just completely oblivious to the fact that I just witnessed profound harm to the face of one of the people I love most in the world? I'm not sure. But fleetingly, I wonder why we as a society ask a man barely past puberty with a prefrontal cortex that isn't even fully developed to be responsible for protecting anyone or anything. I really have to call his mom, I say, pulling out my phone in an effort to close our conversation. Another nurse approaches. Ma'am, I'm very sorry, but you can't stay here. There are no visitors allowed during COVID. For the first time, I register that in this waiting room, there are no people waiting. The chairs are all turned to face the wall. The TV is the only source of sound in the room. I get it, I know, but his family lives an hour away, and I'm the closest. I trail off. What am I exactly? The nurse, I can see, is thinking the same thing. What's your relation to him? I was his 6th grade teacher many years ago. She looks at me with some combination of disbelief and disinterest. I know my time with her is running short, and I'm struggling to come up with the right words. Later, much later, as I think back on what I should have said, I imagine what it would look like to explain our relationship. To force her to listen to my Grey's Anatomy-inspired monologue before she walks back into the exam room to see Troy. Imagine me as Meredith Grey. Listen to me, please listen, I'd tell her. You have a young man in your care tonight who you don't know. He came in as a victim of an assault, blood pouring from his mouth, his eyes so beaten they're swollen shut. I don't know what you see when you see him. I don't know what stereotypes, if any, rush through your mind. I don't know how those stereotypes are going to inform the way you talk to him, the way you treat him, the way you manage his pain. I do know, however, how I want you to see him. Maybe she would nod her head then and turn to walk away, but I wouldn't be done. I'd pull her back, continue my Meredith Grey style plea. I want you to see the scrawny 11-year-old who walked in my classroom in 2004 and called out my rookie teacher mistakes from the very first moment I made them. I want you to see the high school student who'd let me tutor him in Spanish on weekends so he could maintain grades needed to play sports. I want you to see the proud college graduate who decorated his cap with photographs of the people he loved most and included a space for me. I want you to see the Ivy League admissions counselor who advocates so hard just to get even 1 or 2 young people from circumstances like his to be accepted into his employer's hallowed halls. I want you to see the uncle who's been taking over childcare duties for his 3-year-old niece because her mom is an essential worker. He holds her on his lap during Zoom calls with other colleagues, cooks her meals, makes her watch Sesame Street. I want you to see the man who spoke at my wedding in December, who told me he used to think I was the Kobe Bryant of teachers, but that after getting to know me in the context of my relationship with Laura, now he sees me as LeBron. Who told me in front of everyone I love that I'm his best friend. At this point, I know the nurse would be exasperated, that she would tap her foot impatiently, make eyes at the security guard to remove me from the ER, where I'm not supposed to be in the first place. But before I'm pulled away, I'll try one more time. His jaw's gonna be wired shut, so you're not gonna understand his corny jokes, but I guarantee he's gonna try to tell you some. And he's gonna act stubborn and independent and like he can handle all of this on his own, but you can't be dissuaded. Stay in his ear long enough and I promise he'll listen to you. If all fails, crack a joke about his receding hairline, tell him I told you to. But none of that comes to me in the moment. Instead, here I am, nearly 16 years after our first meeting, standing in the BMC emergency room in flamingo pajama pants from Old Navy, and an I Love Biscuits t-shirt from the Loveless Cafe, with my hair standing straight up off my head and no underwear and no socks on, because that's how I left the house. Because that's how urgently I knew I needed to go. If that isn't the definition of family, I'm not sure what family is. But for this nurse, in the middle of this pandemic and protest-fueled crisis, it doesn't matter. There are no words that I can use to explain that for queer people, the definitions of family fall far outside the relationship vocabulary of the English language. There's hardly ever been grace for queer folks in hospital waiting rooms in this country, and there's certainly no grace during COVID, particularly none for teachers turned mentors turned family. I'm really sorry, ma'am. This is the worst part of my job right now, is telling people they can't stay. And Troy's conscious. He's walking and talking. Sometimes I have to say this to families when the patient is dying. She gestures towards the glass double doors of the emergency exit. I push on the bar and leave. Laura and I drive home, both of us trying to get our hands to stop shaking. In the weeks and months ahead, Troy and I will make jokes comparing him to Kanye West, Jack Johnson, and Muhammad Ali. We will wade through confusing piles of short-term disability paperwork and doctor's orders, draft and revise emails to human resources, laugh and share disgust at the recipes provided by the hospital for his liquid diet, blends of mushy fruit and canned soup so strange in combination that just reading them makes me queasy. Celebrate when the wires holding his jaw together can finally be removed and he eats his first solid foods, french fries and mac and cheese. Come to terms with the fact that Troy's vision will never be completely unobstructed, that the scars from this night will not leave either of us as easily as we might wish. There are no words for our relationship, no terms to define what it looks like to love someone who's too old to be your son and too young to be your brother, but occupies the kind of space in your body that's typically reserved for those relationships. No way to categorize the depth of feeling that makes me fight through crowds, argue with police officers, and debate with nurses to ensure Troy's safety and survival. Later, when I'm back in my bed and trying to get my heartbeat to settle, Troy texts me one more time before going to sleep. Love you. Sorry I had to call. And for once on this chaotic night, I know exactly the right words. I write back, don't you dare apologize. You call. You always call. Thank you.
What a fantastic group. Let's give another round of applause for everybody today. Absolute magic. Goosebumps all night. It was fantastic. Thank you guys so much. And that concludes tonight's readings. And go enjoy your evening. And we'll see you bright and early for class and breakfast. Thank you, everybody.